It was nearly 2 a.m. when Barron Trump, still in his tailored vest and polished shoes from a formal dinner, stood quietly by the panoramic window of his top-floor suite in a luxury Parisian hotel. The room was dimly lit, save for the soft glow of streetlights bleeding through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Beneath, the city of Paris slept, its pulse quiet, the low hum of life reaching him like the distant murmur of a forgotten dream. Barron lifted the untouched glass of water to his lips, his fingers cool against the crystal, but he did not drink. His eyes, dark and contemplative, traced the horizon. Out there on the far edge of the city's heart, something caught his attention. A flicker, a dim, almost imperceptible glow from the old quarter. In the distance, beyond the gleaming facades of wealth and the ornate gates of exclusive districts, there was an ancient stone church. Its silhouette was obscured in shadow, yet tonight it seemed alive, as though someone had left a candle burning inside to defy the cold and the dark. The windows, faintly illuminated, cast a warm glow that seemed to beckon, though Barron could not explain why. Something within him stirred. A tug, subtle yet undeniable, like an old wound being reopened. He didn't know why, but he couldn't look away. With a slow, measured breath, Barron placed the glass back on the table, his fingers lingering for a moment, and then he turned away. He moved with a purpose now, though no one could have guessed what it was. Changing into a simple black coat, a dark scarf, and leaving his watch behind, he slipped into the hall of the hotel, unnoticed by the few staff who wandered in the late-night stillness. His footsteps were silent on the polished marble floors as he moved through the hotel lobby, past the garden, and into the narrow streets of Paris. Paris at night could be a holy place or a haunted one. Tonight, it was both. Barron felt the cold air bite at his skin, but it was the kind of cold that felt cleansing, as though it might clear his thoughts and perhaps even his heart. The cobblestones were slick from an earlier rain, reflecting the dim glow of street lamps, and the ivy-clad walls of ancient buildings whispered stories of centuries gone by. He passed shuttered cafes, abandoned bicycles, and windows that hadn't been touched by human hands for years. Each step felt like walking through the memories of someone else's life. Finally, he arrived at the church. It was smaller than he had anticipated, perhaps no bigger than a classroom. The door was ajar, a crack wide enough to let in the cold, inviting him. Inside, the flicker of candlelight illuminated cracked pews and faded frescoes, their once vibrant colors now reduced to muted whispers of the past. The smell of incense mixed with dust and cold stone, a scent of things forgotten but not unloved. Barron took a deep breath, his presence almost unnoticed by the room. 7 people were gathered there, sitting in quiet isolation. An elderly priest, his back hunched with age, stood at the altar reading softly in Latin. His voice, steady but weary, seemed to carry the weight of centuries. A mother held a child close to her side, her eyes distant. A woman, her hands trembling, sat with her gaze fixed on the floor. An older man buried his face in his scarf, his shoulders rising and falling with the weight of silent sobs. And in the back, there was a man in a long gray coat, his posture stiff as if the world was too much for him, and his eyes closed as though the only way to survive was to not look at anything at all. Barron paused at the threshold, uncertain, until the priest's voice broke the silence. "You don't need to understand the words," the priest said, his voice soft but carrying an unexpected weight. He did not turn, but Barron felt the words settle in his chest. "You only need to listen." And so he did. He slid into the last row, his breath still uneven from the cold, and lowered his head. He didn't kneel, not yet, but he bowed his head, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him like the stones beneath his feet. At first, he didn't pray. He wasn't sure how anymore, or maybe he had forgotten how to pray at all. Minutes passed in silence. Then a voice, fragile and warm, broke the stillness beside him. "You can sit here," the old man next to him offered. "You don't have to say anything. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words ever could." Barron nodded slowly, his throat tight, unsure of what he was feeling, unsure if he was even feeling anything at all. "I don't really know why I'm here," Barron said, his voice low and almost like a confession. The words felt heavier in the air than he had expected. "That's how it always begins," the man replied, his voice gentle, knowing. "You come looking for answers. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll find the right questions instead. Barron's gaze lifted toward the altar, where the priest's voice shifted back to Latin, now a soft murmur, a chant almost forgotten by time. The candles flickered, casting shadows on the cracked stone, illuminating the faces of those around him. They didn't expect anything from him. No one here cared who he was, no headlines, no demands, just the presence of others, silently existing. He had spent so much of his life running from himself, hiding behind the shadows of others' expectations. But here in this small, forgotten church, surrounded by broken people and dim lights, Barron felt invisible. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, he allowed himself to be nobody. The weight of the room wasn't in its silence. It was in the stories left unsaid, the ones lingering in the corners of the space. He wondered what it would mean to join them, not in posture, but in surrender. He looked around again. No one knew his name. No one expected anything. And in that anonymity, so strange to someone born into the public eye, Barron found a rare kind of peace. He shifted slightly, then lowered himself to his knees. The cold wooden floor pressed against him, and something inside him stilled. It wasn't prayer, not yet, but it felt like it, a first step towards something he had been running from for too long. The priest's chant continued, steady and sure, while the man beside him whispered once more. "You seem like someone who hasn't spoken to God in a very long time," he observed. Barron hesitated, his breath slow and measured. "I don't know if I ever have," he said, his voice barely more than a breath, full of raw honesty. The man's smile was small but kind, knowing. "He doesn't mind that," the man said softly. "He prefers sincerity over ceremony, and sincerity in a world like this is rare." Barron turned slightly toward the man, searching his face. "You knew who I was the whole time," Barron said, not accusatory but with a trace of resignation. "Why didn't you say anything?" The man nodded slowly, his expression not one of judgment, but of understanding. "Of course I knew who you were," he replied, his voice calm. "But I didn't say anything because I knew you needed a place where no one would." Barron blinked as though the weight of the truth finally landed. There was no pride in the man's voice, no awe, no expectation, just understanding. As Barron knelt, his thoughts swirled. The priest's voice faded again into Latin, and the room seemed to breathe with him. He didn't feel the need to rush. The world, for once, had slowed. "I've been surrounded by people my entire life," Barron said quietly, his voice stronger now, more confident. "But I've never felt more alone than I do right now. I keep thinking if I just go somewhere new, talk to someone different, maybe I'll feel something again. Maybe I'll remember who I was before everything got complicated." The old man leaned forward, his words careful but certain. "You haven't lost who you are," he said. "You've just buried it beneath the weight of who they wanted you to be. And sometimes the weight of that disguise becomes unbearable. That's why you're here." Barron looked down, letting those words sink in. "You talk like you felt it too." "We all have," the man replied. "Anyone who's ever been told they were something before they ever had the chance to find out who they were." Barron nodded, understanding more than he had anticipated. "Certainly. Here's an enhanced version of that passage with more depth and emotional weight." The priest raised his hands, a silent command that the ceremony had reached its end. The flames of the candles shuddered, their light flickering weakly before sinking into the dimness of the room. As the final echoes of the priest's chant drifted into the stillness, the congregation slowly began to rise, their movements subdued, as if not wanting to disturb the sacred quiet that had taken over the space. One by one they exited, their footsteps barely audible on the cold stone floors. But Barron stayed seated, unmoving, his gaze fixed on the flickering shadows around him. His presence, still and unbroken, seemed at odds with the departing crowd. "Will you come again?" the old man asked gently, his voice breaking through the silence as he stood, leaning heavily on a cane Barron hadn't noticed before, its worn wood creaking slightly with the shift of weight. Barron looked up, his eyes meeting the man's, and for a long moment, the question hung between them, heavy and unspoken, filled with the weight of something deeper than the simple inquiry. The air around him felt thicker now, as if the very room was waiting for his answer. "I don't know," Barron said, the words slipping out with unexpected honesty, his voice raw, as though a part of him had just been uncovered. But tonight, something changed. The man's lips curved into a soft, knowing smile, and there was a warmth in his gaze that seemed to soften the years etched into his face. In that simple expression, there was an understanding that Barron hadn't expected, something beyond words, a silent acknowledgement of the journey he was beginning, however uncertain it might be. "Then you're already on your way," the man said, his voice gentle but certain, as though the truth had already taken root. As Barron watched him shuffle away, disappearing into the shadows with the quiet grace of someone who had already walked through the storm, Barron felt something settle deep within him, a quiet stirring, like the first breeze after a long storm. It was not an answer, not yet, but it was the beginning of something, something he wasn't quite ready to name, but something he knew would change everything. Let's keep the conversation going. Subscribe, share, and drop your thoughts below. Your perspective is valuable and might inspire others.